Okay, this is an article that's from the Washington Post I found several years ago. It talks about basically, it's not what we're going to be looking at today or anything. Basically, it's just something to get you started reading here for the next couple of weeks. Kind of deals with basically the idea of price floors and price ceilings. So we'll get to that in a little bit more detail later on. Okay. So let's kind of go ahead and review what we had looked at on Friday. And I split the class between this one and the social issues. So basically everything that's done in Unit 1 between you guys and the class that I teach at 1010 is completely identical in Unit 1. But I did things a little bit out of order for their class rather because of the questions people were asking. So let's kind of review what we've done a little bit just so I can keep track of making sure that I've done everything that we need to do before we can move on. We've been looking at this idea of demand here's our quantity, here's our demand curve, here's our price, right? And what we saw was that we know that this guy slopes down. I'm just making up numbers here, 10 and 5. And I'm going to make this guy say 15. And I'll make him say 8. So we know that we have this downward sloping demand curve. We have this law of demand, right? And remember that our law of demand says basically, hey, as price goes up, the quantity demanded is going to decrease. Not demand decreasing, the quantity demanded is going to decrease, right? And we saw that there was, in essence, two different things happening here. One was this income effect and substitution effect. And what these guys said was, in essence, hey, when the price goes down, it's just as if you have more money, right? And at the exact same time, when the price goes down, we substitute away from the goods that are now relatively more expensive, even though their price hasn't changed, and we substitute towards this good, which is now relatively cheaper. So when the price goes from, say, $10 to $8, it's just as if the money in my wallet can buy more, which is true. That's the income effect. And I'm going to substitute away from these other goods and substitute towards this guy. We also saw that the flip side of that was basically this idea of willingness to pay and diminishing marginal utility. And what we meant by that was that each successive unit of the good that we buy gives us slightly less utility. So, in other words, we know that the height of the demand curve equals our willingness to pay, right? And the reason that we're willing to pay that much is because that's how much marginal utility we get from that unit. That unit gives us that much MU, marginal utility, right? So in other words, what this says is that when we're looking here at this guy, we say that the fifth unit gives us $10 worth of utility, right? And therefore, we're going to be willing to pay $10, right? So let's make this clear. It's not that we're willing to pay $10 for 5 units. We're willing to pay $10 for the fifth TH unit, right? And similarly over here, right, we've got number 15, right? This 15th unit gives us $8 of utility. Therefore, we're willing to pay $8. Right? In other words, it's not that we're willing to spend $8 and get 15 units. I'm going to spend $8 and I'm going to get 15 songs or whatever it is that we're looking at. I'm willing to spend $8 on the 15th TH unit. All right. We also saw what we would have with an increase and decrease in demand. So I'm just going to use these same numbers, 5 and 15. So here we have, say, 10 and 8. And what we said is that, well, when we're looking at an increase in demand, what that means is that at every price, people want to buy more. And so we said, okay, that means this guy's shifting this way. And sure enough, at this price of 10, people now want to buy, say, 12. And at this price of 8, people now want to buy, say, 20. It also means that we're willing to pay more for each successive unit that we have. So we could just as easily say that an increase in demand means that at every price we want more, when we could also say an increase in demand means that at every price we're willing to pay more for every quantity. Right? So here was our quantity, here was our price. Here was our demand, so we had 5 and 15. Here's 10. Here's 8. And when we have this increase in demand, here we can say, oh, well, look, at every price consumers are wanting to buy more units, or we could say for every single unit we're willing to pay more. So for the 5th unit, we used to be willing to pay $10, not $10 for 5 units, $10 for the 5th unit. Now how much are we willing to pay for the 5th unit? Give me a number that makes sense. Just some number greater than that, right? Now the 5th unit is worth $20 to us, right? We're willing to pay 20. The 15th unit, TH, used to be worth $8 to us. We were willing to spend $8 for the 15th TH unit, not $8 for 15 total units. Now how much is the 15th unit worth? Yeah. I could say 9 because it doesn't quite hit, right? Same thing with a decrease in demand, right? We saw that when we had a decrease in demand, at every price consumers wanted less. I'll just use these same numbers here, 5 and 15. Here's 10 and 8. All right. And here we're going to have this decrease in demand. And we said with a decrease in demand at every price, consumers want to buy less, right? So here at a price of 10, now they only want, say, 1. At a price of 8, now they'll buy, say, 11, right? Or similarly, the decrease in demand could mean that every quantity we're now going to do what? Exactly. We're willing to pay less for it. So here we have our, let's do it like this. All right. So our 5th unit we used to be willing to pay $10 for, right? Not $10 for 5 units, $10 for the 5th TH unit. Now how much are we willing to spend for the 5th unit? Give me a number that makes sense. $6 sounds good. The 15th unit, TH, used to be worth $5. We would spend $5 for the 15th, not $5 for 15 units. Now how much is the 15th unit worth? That's exactly right. It's not worth anything to us. All right? Zero. We wouldn't pay anything for it. If somebody was out there in front of Strong Hall passing out music CDs, would you take one if they're free? Some people would, but I guarantee half of you would not. Right? When's the last time you guys bought a music CD? Exactly. You're going to go buy it, you're going to take one for free? Half the computers don't even have CD-ROMs anymore, if they're new. Here, take my CD. No, it's garbage. Right? It's the best music ever. I'm sure it is. But I don't want the CD. Right? So changes in demand. Okay? And we saw what some of these factors were that would change demand. What were some of those factors?
The preferences of consumers.
So we had things like preferences. What else? Exactly. We had preferences. We had income. But what was true about income? Exactly. You have to make a distinction between, are you talking about a normal good or are you talking about an inferior good? Because with the normal good, what happens? Exactly. As income goes up, we buy more. With the inferior good, when income goes up, we buy less. Right? The demand decreases. Right? What were some of the other ones we saw? Price of a related good. And so what was true about these related goods? We had two different classifications here.
Substitutes and complements.
Very good. So we had our substitutes and our complements. And substitutes and complements are what? What's an example?
Substitutes you can swap out a good, like if you wanted a fruit and the apples are too high, you could go buy oranges instead.
So if the price of apples goes up, and we're saying apples and oranges are substitutes, what happens to the demand for oranges? Exactly. Demand for oranges increases, right? Because we're switching. And then what was true about complements?
Like the price of hot dogs go up, like the demand for hot dog buns goes down.
Exactly. These are guys that are consumed together, right? They're consumed together. And so we could say the price of the hot dog itself goes up. So we're going to see the demand for hot dog buns goes down, all right? Because we're buying fewer hot dogs. Therefore, we need fewer hot dog buns. Hot dogs are also inferior goods, by the way. And like I said, hot dogs are good. I like them. It's not, an inferior good doesn't mean that it's like evil. What were some of these other two? What were these last two? Expectations about future prices and income. Very good. And our last one was number of consumers, right? So if the number of consumers goes up, we can expect demand to increase. We expect the number of consumers to go down. We can expect these guys to go, demand to decrease. Okay. So let's look at this important distinction between, because here when these guys change in, we're looking at changes in demand. When price changes, we're looking at changes in quantity demanded. All right? And so we've got an important distinction here. So here's our quantity. Here's our price. All right? Triangle means change. Change in quantity demanded. Change in demand. Okay? What's happening here is a change in price. We don't know how that change in price is coming about yet. And what we're going to see later on Wednesday is that change in price is going to come up from a change in supply. This change in demand is when one of these factors over here is changing. So here you're looking at a change in demand determinants. Okay. Here we move along the curve. Here we move to a new curve. So you'll recall when we were looking at graphing, we said, oh, look, we have this drunk function, right? We said, here's how much the person's blood alcohol content is changing as the number of beers is changing. That was this guy, right? We were moving along the curve. And then we said, oh, no, this is the curve for a 180-pound guy. What does the curve look like for a 115-pound woman? That's this guy. It's a whole new relationship, right? When we draw this guy, bless you, when we draw this guy and we're changing price, all of this other stuff is staying the same. Preferences, income, price of related goods, expectations, number of consumers. There's nothing that's changing the fundamental relationship between price and the quantity that people want to buy. We're just changing the price. When we have this guy changing, one of these is changing. There's now a whole new relationship between price and the quantity that people want to purchase, right? So here, for example, on this guy, when we're going from this point right here to this point, this is a change in the quantity demanded. It's not a change in demand. It's a change in the quantity demanded. These guys right here are changes in demand. There's a whole new relationship. In fact, the price can stay the same. And people can be buying more or buying less depending upon whether demand has increased or decreased. Right? So let's look at some examples. This is going to be a change in quantity demanded or a change in demand. A barber raises the price of haircuts and experiences a decline in sales. Is that a change in demand or is that a change in quantity demanded? Exactly, right? So here we've got a situation where we're charging $10 for a haircut, right? And he's doing, let's see, 30 haircuts a day. And he increases the price to $14, and this falls to, say, 20. I'm just making up a number, right? So we've gone from this point right here to this point, right? We're looking at a change in quantity demanded. What's happening here? What are people doing? They're getting fewer haircuts. How? They're going somewhere else, letting it grow longer, doing it themselves, getting it cut really, really short so you can only have to get one haircut, you can get fewer, right? Whatever that it is, right? They're doing something else, right? The quantity demanded is decreasing. There's not been a change in demand. The price of gas went from $2 before the hurricanes to about 2:30. Was that a change in demand or was that a change in quantity demanded of gas? Quantity demanded, right? So if the paper says the price went from $2 to $2.30 and we've seen a decrease in demand for gas, you know that that is what? Incorrect. That's exactly right. Number 2. Consumer incomes rise. With the result that more jewelry is purchased. Change in demand or change in quantity demanded? Very good. Change in demand. So here's our quantity, here's our price. Here's demand. We can make this be anything we want it to be, right? It could be, well, I don't know, $500 to buy 20 rings and at a price of $750 to buy 10 rings, right? So now we have this change in income, consumer incomes rise with the result that more jewelry is purchased. The price can be anything you want it to be. The price can be $750, the price can be $500, it can be anything. Make this say 30, right? You don't even have to have the second one, you can just have the first one. The price can stay the same, the price is at $750. Oh, we're selling 10 rings a week. The price goes, the consumer incomes rise. Keeping the price at $750. Now we're selling 18 rings a week, or whatever the number is. All right. And what type of good would this guy be? Very good, normal. Let's look at number 3 here. The price of Toyotas goes up with the result that the sale of Fords decreases. What's happening here? The price of Toyotas increases with the result that the sale of Fords goes down. Change in demand or change in quantity demanded?
Toyotas cost more when the price, or when the sale of Fords go up.
So that's what I'm saying. What happens? Is it a change in demand or is that a change in quantity demanded? Got a 50-50 chance of guessing right. Change in demand for which market? Toyota? Ford. Here's the demand for Fords, right? Price of say 15,000, price of say 20,000. Going to sell 10 a week. At 15,000, I would sell 12 a week. the price of Toyotas goes up. Oh, this should be increasing. I see what you guys are saying now. The price of Toyotas goes up with the result that the sale of Fords increases. What's happening over here? What are people doing? They're shifting from Toyotas to Fords. We see the demand for Fords going up. So this guy is doing this. All right? So at a price of, say, $20,000, now people want to buy, say, 11 Fords per week. What's happening, though, for Toyotas? $50-50 chance of guessing right. I'll just even make the prices the same. Exactly. So what's happening over here? The change in quantity demanded at Toyotas. They're buying fewer of these, they're buying more of these. This is because of a change in demand. This is because of a change in quantity demanded. Because what's happening here is a change in price. What's happening here is not a change in the price of Fords. It's one of these guys changing. Oh, it's the price over related. Good. That's what's changing. So when you're looking at these things, you've got to ask yourself, what's changing? Is it one of the demand determinants? If it is, then it's a change in demand. If it's just a change in price, then it's going to be a change in quantity demanded. And like I said, we don't know why this has changed yet. But as we'll see here, I think here's the supply of Toyotas. This guy has changed, which made the price go from $15,000 to $20,000. Yes?
So, you're saying a scenario like number 3 could be both?
It can be both depending upon which one you're looking at. Are you looking at the market for Fords or are you looking at the market for Toyotas? That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The university takes out parking to put in buildings. As a result, the price of parking goes up. Right? Change in the demand for parking or change in the supply? I guess, I mean, we don't know the supply yet, right? Here's where we are. Here's the supply of parking, whatever this is. I don't even know how many of these slots. We don't have 10,000. Let's say it's 4,000. I don't know how many we have. This is some number. Whatever this guy is, $100. Take out parking spots. You're here. This guy goes to 150. This guy goes to this. This is a change in the quantity demanded of parking. It's because there's been a decrease in supply. But if we're at the point where we're here, this is 150 and 3,000. This is 100 and 4,000. And there's an increase in the number of students that come to Missouri State. That's a change in demand. The demand for parking has changed. And interestingly enough, and we'll talk about this more on Friday, both of these things are basically changing at the exact same time. You have both an increase in demand and a decrease in supply at the exact same time. And what we'll see is we'll see how that changes both price and quantity. Questions about demand before we move to supply? Okay, so let's look at supply. When we're done with supply and demand. I will always give a week's notice on tests. Remember what I said on day one. The university wants us to say the tests are on such and such date, and I'm just not going to do that. The test is whenever the test is, when we're done with the material, whenever that is. So let's look at supply. We said that demand was a schedule that showed the various amounts of a product which consumers are willing and able to purchase at each specific price in a series of possible prices during some specified time frame. Supply is very, very similar, right? It's a schedule which shows the various amounts of a product that producers are willing and able to bring to market. At each specific price in a series of possible prices. During some specified time frame. Okay. So we said demand was the schedule that showed the various amounts of a product which consumers were willing and able to purchase at each specific price in a series of possible prices during some specified time frame. Supply is a schedule that shows the various amounts of a product that producers are willing and able to bring to market at each specific price in a series of possible prices during some specified time frame. So let's take a look here at an example. Let's assume that we're looking at the market for wheat. So we have our price, we have our quantity supplied. Okay. And we have various prices here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And I'm just making up numbers here, so it's going to make this guy 1 million. We'll make this guy 2 million. We'll make this guy 3 million. We'll make this guy 4 million. We'll make this guy 5 million. Okay. Now we saw with demand, when we saw increases in price, what did people do? They bought less. With supply, when we see increases in price, what do we see happening? Make more, right? So the law of supply says, ceteris paribus, as price increases, the quantity supplied increases, right? And we can graph this guy and see what he looks like. He's a pretty easy guy to draw. So we've got our guy here. Here's our quantity. Here's our price. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these are in millions. Right? Are these millions? And we have some supply curve that looks like this, right? We see, sure enough, that as the price increases, the quantity supplied is going to increase, right? And just like with demand, I mean, we could say, oh, well, how much is going to be produced if the price is $2.50? Well, we can know that from this guy. So we saw with demand, this guy was downward sloping because of income and substitution effects. And with supply, it's a similar idea, right? Because we also have this willingness to pay, all right, slash which told us what the height of the demand curve was, right? It's this idea of diminishing marginal utility.
So for example, would this like be like the bottled water in Florida? Like,
Yeah, to a degree, yeah, that's exactly right. And what we want to know is we want to know if they wanted to bring in more water, why did the price go up? That's what this guy wants to tell us, right? Because we know what's happening here with demand. We had income and substitution effects, or this idea of willingness to pay, the idea of marginal utility. Supply is similar, right? Why is this guy sloping up? First one here, it costs more to make more. Right? Let's look at a map of the United States. When you think of wheat, what states do you think of? All right, here's the U.S. When you think of the wheat market, what do you think of? What states? Kansas, Nebraska, right? You think of here, right? You think of South Florida? No. Do you think of Washington State? No, right? When you people see wheat, they know Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, Iowa's really more corn, Missouri, northern Missouri, basically, northern Oklahoma, that part. Can we grow wheat here? Yes. Why don't we? Because it costs a whole lot. It costs a lot more money to grow wheat in South Florida and Northwest Washington than it does in Kansas and Nebraska, right? And Oklahoma. In fact, when I was in Oklahoma in grad school, we went away for vacation. We came back 2 weeks later. There was wheat growing in our yard. You didn't even have to plant it. The stuff just grows automatically, right? It's cheap. So if we want to grow wheat here in South Florida or here in the northwest corner of the state, it costs more to grow wheat there. And we're going to need a higher price to compensate for that additional cost. So we say to ourselves, why does this guy slope up? Well, it costs more to make more. Just like the height of the demand curve told us how much people were willing to pay, the height of the supply curve tells us how much it costs. This guy right here is telling us benefits. This guy right here is telling us costs. So when we look at our supply curve here, right, we know that price is not set. Price is not different for all of these single units. Price is what it is, right? Let's just assume that the price of wheat is $3. We don't know how that price is set yet. It's just $3. All right. So here's our price. The height of the supply curve tells us marginal cost. It tells us how much it costs to make that particular unit. This 1/1,000,000th bushel of wheat costs $1 to make. That's what this guy says. It's not $1 to make 1,000,000 bushels. The 1,000,000th TH bushel cost $1 to make. The 2,000,000th TH bushel costs $2 to make. In other words, when we make this 2 millionth bushel, here we are, we've made 1,999,999 bushels. And this can have some cost. It can be whatever cost you want it to be. $1 trillion. Cost of this is 1 trillion. I'm making up a number, 100,000 million, billion, trillion. What this guy says is that when we make bushel 2 million, costs now go to 1 trillion and 2. That's what that says. It's the additional cost. It's how much costs have gone up by. So if our price is $3 and we want people to make 4 million bushels, is that going to happen? Nope. Because all of these bushels, bushel 3,000,001, all the way up, all cost more than $3 to make. And if we're only getting $3, it doesn't make sense to keep making more. We're not going to make them. We'll pick it up from here on Wednesday.